In this movie, we're going to take a look at mirroring and laying out UVs. So we've previously looked at projecting our UVs, and here we can see we've projected our wings, we've projected the side of the crow's head, the feet, the legs, and for the most part, we've only used our planar projection and our cylindrical projection to achieve this. Once I get all of my UV parts laid out, instead of having to then go to the other side and lay out the wing and the head and the body, we can mirror our UVs over. Now, obviously, this is only going to work if our model is perfectly symmetrical, but we even have ways around that as well. We have a symmetrical model, so what I'm going to do is choose just to mirror half of it. And we can do this by going to Mesh. I'm going to use Mirror Cut. And we'll just open that up. The reason why I'm doing this is because I have my geometry already, and I'm going to cut it along the YZ axis, which is also the very first option there. We're going to merge it back with the original. So let's choose Apply. We'll select the object. Basically, it looks like nothing happened, but we do see this new tool. It's this planar object here that is now in the middle of my model. Grab this and move it, you'll see that, well, it's definitely dividing my character in half. And we could even rotate it and create some weird two-headed creature. And again, we can see that those faces disappeared. We can just turn on our default material there. But we don't want to do that. We just want to mirror our UVs. So we just undid that. I'm going to select the model, delete my history, also take this mirror cutting plane and just delete it. We don't need it anymore. And we'll select the model and now go and look at our UVs. Still don't see anything different. But if I go to UV and go to UVs, if I select a bunch of these UVs like that and go and look, hey, I've got UVs. I didn't have UVs for that half of the model before. So it mirrored them over. They're now sitting in the exact same spot as our original UVs. That's not good. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is first make sure I have all of my UVs for this half of the model. So I'll just select and do select shell to make sure I'm grabbing every little border edge there. I'm going to hit W and then just translate that over. And we can turn off all of that stuff there now. All right, now I have two halves of my model. And I can start to piece some of these things back together. For instance, part of the body you can see there, we can move and sew these edges so that we don't have a seam between them. There's no reason to keep them as separate objects. But part of the problem is that it's flipped. Here is the corresponding edge, and you can see where it is on the other model. Moving and sewing these together is not going to work right. It's just going to take this and move it in the exact same spot so that you can't tell that there's two shells there. So I need to flip these. One good tool that we have here is to toggle this shaded UV display, and it shows me the UVs that are actually flipped in the wrong direction. So I can see all of the red UVs. They are my mirrored UVs. Well, they're going the wrong way. We can then select them all and choose flip in the U direction and just flip those around. And now we're good. I can start sewing these pieces together. So I'm going to select border edges there. Notice I have some extra ones selected. They're already sewn together. We cannot sew them again. So we don't have to worry about making a sloppy selection here. And then I can come up and choose move and sew selected edges. That puts those two pieces together. Here's another section. I believe this is the back of the crow. We'll do the same exact thing. Move and sew. We might be able to find some other pieces here. I think this is the tail, or even some of the head. We might be able to move and sew something together like that. So once we get all of our pieces laid out, sewn together, everything looking good, we can then lay out all of the UVs within the 0 to 1 texture space. We can do this manually, but it's kind of nice to have a tool that will just do all of it for us. So I'm going to select all those UVs and go to polygons and choose the layout options. First, let's just reset, make sure that we're using our defaults. I want single or multiple objects to be non-overlapping. This is good. Prescale. Now, this is the powerful one. We want to set it to object, and then it will take all of our pieces and parts and make them of the same exact scale. So even if I were to select one wing here, scale that up so it doesn't fit with the rest of the parts there. So this prescale will fix the scale of that object. Then we have flipped reverse. We don't have to worry about that. We flipped them all already. But if you still saw some red out here and didn't want to manually bother with it, you could just leave that there. The region that it's referring to is down here, this region preset, which by default goes to the full square of the 0 to 1 texture space. But you could lay the UVs out into a completely different square. And sometimes we need to, when we have a very large object with tons of UVs, we don't want to cram them all into one single texture. We want to use 10 textures, and therefore we could separate them into different 0 to 1 spaces. But we just have one, so we're just going to go into that one region. Rotate. We could leave this on or off. I'll actually shut that off so it doesn't rotate any of the models. But what it's going to do, either 90 degrees or free, is take the UV shell and rotate it so that you're occupying the most amount of space in that 0 to 1 texture area. Next, we have the percentage of space and a spacing preset. Basically, if you're doing a 512 by 512 pixel texture map, it suggests to use this type of percentage space. I'm just going to hike it up and you can see 2048. It says, hey, you should use this because it's a much larger map. I'm just going to push this out just a little bit so we can kind of see what's actually happening there. And it's going to default to custom. All right, we're good. Let's choose layout UVs. And you can see it now packs my UVs into that 0 to 1 texture space. That little distance right there is that percentage of space that I set, that 0.2. That's pretty tight. Typically, we like to have more space in between our UV shells. What can actually happen is that the pixel color in the texture will actually bleed. So it'll run into other UV shells, and you can see seams or lines, just texture distortion in general between the shells. Not really what we want. If I just increase this a little bit, we'll then hit apply. And now you can see, hey, I got a lot more space in between there. That's much nicer. And I don't have to worry about my UV shells cramming into one another or having that texture bleed.